Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
And now the greatest parking lot cop since I had that job.
Maybe better.
Most likely.
Felicia, alcoholic. Felicia. Can you guys hear me in the back? Okay. Okay, louder? Okay. Man, I feel it. I got sober, I guess just to qualify, January 3rd, 2013. I share this a lot, but it's pretty much the meat and potatoes of my first day in AA because I had no idea what I was doing. I remember it was a young people's meeting. I really wanted to sit on the windowsill, but I thought that was reserved for like really cool people. And then I found out that I really wanted to sit on the windowsill, but I didn't. And I sat in the back row and I introduced myself as a newcomer. And the only woman who came up after that meeting is still my sponsor for the past approaching 2.5 years. So if you're hesitating on approaching anyone after a meeting, that one, like just that introduction saved my ass because unknowingly she introduced me to my home group, which I went to while I was in school, pretty much every day, my first semester sober. She was sharing at that meeting, and I didn't relate to the speaker. People were just like, bleh, the whole time. But when she shared, she said that she was cutting kale in her kitchen that day, and she paused, and she said that she felt okay. And I was just like, I want that. What is that? I want to cut kale in the kitchen. I want to pause. I want to be okay. I've just been wanting to be okay, like, throughout my whole recovery. You know, like lately I've kind of had a resentment against AA. I think that you're all special needs. I hate coming to AA and everyone's really happy because I'm like, you guys are all on a crutch. You like are just like weird, and I hate being an alcoholic because I just want everything to be so convenient, and I still want to kill myself. But I guess, you know, people tell me the miracle is you may want to kill yourself at points, but at least you don't want to drink. And I'm like, okay, like, what kind of, like, a miracle is that? But I've learned through AA that this isn't going to solve everything. And I've learned it's opened avenues for me to reach out for help in ways that I just didn't even know were possible. You know, I started drinking when I was 12. Total shit show. My drinking did not change. Got wasted, finished like a quarter of a bottle of, I can't remember if it was whiskey or rum. It got me trashed. So I kind of put that aside, didn't really do anything until high school. When I found out that I needed to leave the Midwest, I grew up in the Midwest, that I needed to leave the Midwest for college. I set all of my weed smoking and all of my drinking aside, got my crap together, and decided, okay, it's either Chicago or California. So I decided to go to California to be closer with my father, who is a very alcoholic man, still very sick in his disease. He just can't take a step because he just lives in fear all the time. So anyways, you know, college went on, my drinking and my using went off, got super hooked on pills. I had just been taught my whole life that if you don't show people that you're suffering, that you're totally okay. That was my tool that I used, is that everything is going to be okay if I just show you that I'm okay and everything is fine with me. No one knew how sinister my addiction was. No one knew that I was crying in the library bathroom, choking down pills I didn't want to choke down. And so towards the end of my bottom, I was seeing 6 different therapists at one time because I just had so many issues that and not a single one of them knew that I was drinking the way I did or using the way I did. And so one of them, I thought, I just remember not knowing how to find voice to say, I think I might have a problem. And I remember my way of reaching out was during parties, I would say, hey, listen, like, do you think you can get addicted to these pills? Because secretly, like, inside, I was like, I think I'm addicted. And people would be like, oh, no, you can't get addicted to that. And I'd be like, okay, like, I'm fine. Woo! But then what's really going on? Like, what's going on? Why can't I stop? And so I decided to talk to my psychiatrist with the most degrees. He had an MD, PhD. I was like, this is legit. He might know what's going on. And so I said, listen, this is, I sat with him for 2 hours, including an email interview, and he went over, just how I used, when I used, how I drank, my feelings, and he proposed that he had a solution. He said it's not going to hurt you. And it's funny because before I met with him, he said, what did he say? He said, I have a 12-week program. We're going to work when I see you in person. And I remember telling my friends, this guy's going to get my life together in 12 weeks, guys. 12 weeks. And saw him, and what he had actually said was 12 steps. And so he said, I propose that you go to AA. You are an addict. You are an alcoholic. And I thought, I have nothing else. I've done yoga. I hated yoga. I was doing yoga twice a day. God, I would go on these benders, everything to take care of myself, and it wasn't working. I was cutting people out of my life. That wasn't working. And I just knew that there was something greater than me going on. And I walked in, 3 hours later after seeing him, and I started to hear people wanting to kill themselves. People laughed when I shared that, and people hugged me, and I cried, and I kept coming back because I didn't know what was possible, and I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what powerlessness looked like. I just did everything that I was told. I'm not an honest person by nature. Oh my God, I will lie about anything. I will lie about making challah bread when I'm not even Jewish just to impress a Jewish guy. Oh my God. And I was so relentlessly scared my first year that my sponsors suggested, she said, never go into your head alone. Bring someone with you, bring a flashlight, and bring a sandwich. And I swear to God, if I'm not making meetings, that's the one tool that I've been holding on to is if I'm going to be off my meditation and all that, the whole, game, the least that I can do is drag someone in with me. And thank God, thank God for the people in AA. Thank God for all of you with special needs, because I'm sure as hell special needs. And, I had a friend I had dinner with before this meeting, and he said, he asked me, do you ever think about what if you weren't drinking through college? Do you think picking up the pieces right now would be different? It was so good to hear that question because I wouldn't have changed a thing. I'm grateful for where my drinking and my using took me. I'm not going to say everything's perfect. I still want to kill myself, but if you're new, don't be scared because it's just, I have nothing else. And AA is just what you get through working the steps one-on-one with someone, the relationships that you build. You can hear people talk and talk, but it's just where my drinking and my drugging, there was just this Felicia-sized hole walking around the earth with drugs and pills and anger. And now I'm slowly seeing that hole be filled with something so much greater. And I have issues. I'll end soon. I have issues. I still have issues being on time. It's the most ridiculous thing. I like going to like a top tier university at like 16, 17, graduating on time through her using. I don't know how to be on time. And fundamentally, I believe that I do not exist as a person in this world. I believe that I don't really exist in a world where I deserve to like show up on time or participate. And thank God for AA, because it's just something much deeper than I knew. I didn't even know that I existed. And, through that, my 9th step has helped me a lot. And it's I'm on the 9th step again, and it's amazing. It's been amazing to see the impact that I have on people through these amends, because they think, wow, you really hurt me. And I think, wow, I have an impact on people. Or, oh my God, I love you so much. I can't believe you were going through that. But just the freedom that has come, I don't know. I'm sticking around. I'm being held accountable, and, I'm showing up, and that's all I have. Thanks.
And now I'm going to introduce Bill, who's going to share for as much or as little as he'd like until 8:55.
Okay. Hi. Pardon?
Probably want you to stand.
They're going to want me to stand. Naomi said I could sit. So I'll stand. I'll stand for 20 minutes and sit for 20 minutes.
Yeah, that'll work.
People think. Hi, I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here, and welcome to the people who are new. I want to thank Alita for asking me to do this. She didn't tell me it was going to be for 40 minutes until after I said yes. But, I'm kind of grateful that that's the way it worked out, because I don't know if I would have said yes having known that. I'm one of those people who needs to be either conned or cajoled into stepping out of his comfort zone. And she did that for me, so thank you, Alita. And I am also an adult child of Midwestern parents. And, it's one of the reasons I'm here. But what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I first want to say that people often get up here and say that they don't speak for AA. And I don't speak for AA in a certain regard, but those of us who live this program not only carry the message, we are the message. So all of us speak for AA in a certain regard. And I think part of my responsibility for having been around here for a while is to let the newcomer know that not only can you live life without alcohol, you can live life and enjoy it without alcohol. And that was something I could not believe when I was drinking and using. I did not believe that I could either live or enjoy life without alcohol. And so, and now I do. I'm a late bloomer compared to a lot of people I hear. I didn't start drinking until I headed off to college, and that was a long time ago. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and I kind of, my family wasn't that different than the other families on the block. All of our parents were children of the Depression, and that had a tremendous impact on them. So over the years, I've become much more forgiving of mom and dad, but it's taken a long, long time. And I was extremely anxious as a child. And I think one of the reasons for that was that I just felt like the other kids didn't like me, and because I felt that, it made me feel like I needed to do more in order to feel equal. And that was a hard way to live, and I think it also led to my character defect of one-upsmanship, which I still work on getting removed to this day. But I didn't drink in high school. I was fortunate in the sense that my two sisters and I were pretty bright kids, so I always got good grades, and that was kind of like the sole aim of childhood in the Midwest in the 50s and 60s. was to get good grades. You know, it enabled me to pass for normal, and I desperately wanted to pass for normal. And in fact, I still desperately want to pass for normal. But here, and working this program, I actually get to be normal. You know, so that's a nice feeling. So I did drink once in high school. I did it with 3 friends of mine. We were buddies, and it was kind of the rite of passage drinking that almost every high school kid does. We went out and somehow managed to each get a half pint of orange-flavored vine cup and hung out in somebody's garage and drank it and smoked cigarettes. And I even got in trouble that night. That was an indicator, because we ran out of cigarettes and we were going to a gas station that was 2 blocks away to get cigarettes. And at 11:01, 1 minute after curfew, a cop car pulled over and picked us up and said we were out after curfew. And he went and took us home to our parents, you know. That was kind of like a precursor of what was going to come. So, but overall, you know, other than being anxious, I did well in high school, got accepted into college, and, you know, all hell broke loose in my life. It was I felt so socially inept and inadequate, unprepared for the non-academic element of college that I couldn't handle it. And I found alcohol right away. And it wasn't the magic elixir that a lot of people talk about. And I'm kind of sometimes envious of those people that they had this fantastic experience with their first drink and their next many drinks and things. For me, it was like air. You know, I needed 2 things to get through life: air and alcohol. And for some reason, alcohol was easily available to an 18-year-old at the school I went to, which kind of helped save my life because I needed it. And within 6 months, I was drinking a quart of whiskey a day. And I had an inclination that was probably not the way people normally drink, you know. And, but I couldn't do otherwise. I felt a little bit ashamed of it. I remember that I would wake up in the morning. I'd make sure I woke up before my roommate. And I had the top bunk. And I would slowly open my locker and pull out my quart of whiskey and have a drink before he woke up so I could get going. And it turned out that it was the whiskey that decided whether or not I stayed in my room and drank all day or went to class. You know, once I took that first drink, I surrendered all decision-making to alcohol. And that's how my life went in college. I remember one time my roommate said to me, because he kind of was getting ticked off by my drinking, he said, Bill, I know you're smarter than me, but I would hate it if you ever got better grades. You know, I thought he meant that as a compliment, but, you know, it probably wasn't. It was just an indication of what a screw up I was. And a year later, I remember being in my dorm, and the phone rang, and somebody asked me to come on over. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. And they were playing this game called Whale's Tales that we used to play in college. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but it was one of those games where you answer a question, and if you get it wrong, you take a swig of beer. Well, I didn't happen to have any beer in my room, but I had these 2 quarts of pre-mixed whiskey sours. That was one of my favorite drinks. And so I grab a quart of the whiskey sours. I go to the hall where this guy lived and started playing the game. And 15 minutes later, the whole bottle's gone. And I get up and I says, I'm going to go get my other quart. And the next thing I knew, it was 12 hours later, on my back in my room, on the bed. The room is destroyed. Well, not destroyed, but the bookcase is kind of knocked over, the brick bookcase that we had. And my roommate is staring down at me, the same guy, with a complete look of disgust on his face. And, you know, and I kind of shrugged it off like I always shrugged it off. And then I got up the next morning and went to class, I think. And then a day later, the prefect on the floor came up to me and he said, "Hi, Bill. I brought a friend. I had a friend visiting from St. Louis the other night and brought him over to meet you." And I had absolutely no recollection of this. And so I thought, and I says, "Oh, why did you do that?" And he said, "Because I had never seen anybody so drunk in my entire life. And if your drinking stands out at the University of Notre Dame on St. Patrick's Day, you shouldn't drink." It's a big indicator. But I continued to drink for another 10 years because I was just so afraid of living my life without liquor. I just couldn't imagine doing it. So I eventually flunked out of college. The second semester of my junior year, I only played bridge and drank. So I didn't go to a single class. And about 2 weeks into school, and before finals, I realized I'm probably not going to make it. So I went, and it was the day my mom was coming to pick me up, and I left a note saying, "Dear Mom, I've decided to be by myself for a while." And, which was a cool thing to do, but it was all I could think to do. And I walked down to the dormitory's mailboxes, and because with classes ending, they no longer stuck the mail in everybody's individual mailbox. It just had this big box with a bunch of mail in it, and people were supposed to go through it and pick out what was for them. So I just grabbed a big stack of mail and went back to my room, started opening it up because I figured people would be sending graduation money to the people who were graduating. So I got about $80 doing that. And I thought, that's enough. Went. This was 1970. $80 was a lot of money back in 1970. So I have the clothes on my back and $80, and I decided to go. I'm going to go work on a friend of mine's grandmother's farm in Iowa. And he didn't know I was going to do this, and she had never heard of me. But I headed up towards her place. I get there. It's a Saturday night. And I knock on her door. I got her address from him somehow. And there was no answer. So I went to the neighbors and I knocked on their door. And they said, "Oh, she's out of town. She won't be back until Monday." So this was a little bit of a dilemma. So I had to figure out, well, what do I do from here? And so I thought, well, I'll go visit my aunt in San Francisco. So I stick out my thumb, and I get a few rides, and eventually I get a ride. It's at 1 o'clock in the morning. The guy was from a truck driver, and we're heading into Lincoln, Nebraska, and he asked me if I just wanted to go into town because he's never going to get another ride tonight. And I said, "No, I'll keep trying." I thought I would sleep in the fields if I didn't get picked up. So just a few minutes later, these 3 people in a Corvair pulled up. And they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to San Francisco." And they said, "Hop in, we're going to Berkeley." So I got a ride all the way to Berkeley with these 3 people. Which, was God looking out for me, because I don't know what I would have done if they hadn't picked me up. So we get here, and for some reason, I had always thought Berkeley was by Los Angeles. I get here, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm 11 miles from my aunt. So we got an apartment together. We got jobs with the Census Bureau, counting people. We would go door to door and count people. This was 1970, pre-personal computer, internet, //. And that's what I did for a few months to get by. But that didn't last forever. I wanted to add something else to the way I felt as a kid, which was that I had this tremendous fear of fate. Anytime I failed something, I wouldn't try it again. That comes up repeatedly in my story, in my life during that period. And one of the things I failed to do when I was in high school was I failed my driver's license exam the first time. And I didn't take it again until I came out here. the only reason I did it then was because I was going with this woman who was nearly blind. She bought me a car, which was kind of nice. But we didn't stay together that long, and I didn't have the car that long. But it was a nice car. It was a Dodge Dart. And then I didn't drive again pretty much for the next 25 years, 20 years maybe. I actually became a full-fledged driver when I was 54, which was 2003. But that's how I was. If I failed at something, I was not going to try it again. The shame was just too much. So getting back to getting into Berkeley, we did that thing. We stayed together, the three people and I. But now I didn't have any employment, so I didn't really have a way to pay my rent. So I would go to each of the people and say, oh, why don't you give me your share of the rent? I'll take it down to the landlord. And I would go and pay 2/3 of the rent one month, and they would accept it. Then the next month I would do 2/3 of the rent. They accepted it. It didn't work the third time, and so they kind of came and knocked on the door. My roommates are thinking, I thought we were paying the rent. Well, they were paying their rent. I just wasn't paying mine. So we went our separate ways, and I ended up working with people in wheelchairs throughout the 70s. I got a job as a live-in attendant, which is a perfect job for an alcoholic of my type, because you never have to leave the house, so I lived in, and I really did. Plus, they give people in wheelchairs Valium like it's candy. And I kind of got into Valium during that period. I did Valium on a really regular basis from 1970 to 1980, only having a prescription once that lasted about a month. But the people in wheelchairs were glad to give it out, so I was glad to accept it. I liked pills, too. So I also remember in 1972, I became the first bookkeeper for the Center for Independent Living. And I was glad I was able to do that. It was an interesting job. And it became a world famous organization, actually. And there were only 12 employees at the start, and I was one of them. But I used to go to work with 2 6-packs of beer and drink those 2 6-packs throughout the day. And I was reflecting on this the other day that most people don't get to go to work with 2 6-packs of beer in the morning and drink them throughout the day. And that is a strange way to live. But I just had to have my alcohol. And another incident that occurred that really stands out for me was I was living with this woman. I lived with her for a couple of years. She was a really nice person. And I'm one of those, I often puked when I drank. But I hated being dizzy, and I didn't always puke. And sometimes when I would get dizzy, I would make myself puke, thinking that would help me not be dizzy. It didn't work, but I kept doing it. So one day I'm reading an article in a magazine, and it says that if you drink Epsom salts, they will make you throw up. And I thought, problem solved. So I went out and bought a bag of 5 Epsom salts, and every time that I drank so much that I got dizzy, I would just take some Epsom salts, put them in a glass, and drink them and throw up. And it worked. But a few weeks into that, the woman I'm living with comes in and sees me doing it, and she says, "What are you doing?" And I says, "I'm drinking Epsom salts, so I'll throw up." And she says, "Well, of course you throw up. They're poison." Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So it did stop. I'm not insane, so I just stopped taking the Epsom salts. And I continued to poison myself for another 9 years because I had to keep drinking. There was no way I could not do it. And so it just plodded along, and my drinking, they talk about the shark in Jaws being an eating machine. And I was a drinking and drugging machine. That's what I did throughout the 70s. It's what I had to do. And it's maybe 20 funny stories and 3,500 depressing days. And so that was the 70s for me. how I ended up in AA was a lot of ways, actually. I got involved. Oh, I also remember I got arrested for failure to report for induction in 1973, I believe it was. And it's not like I was avoiding induction. I just failed to report for it because I was incapable of reporting for it. You know, it was just I couldn't get it together enough to go. And I doubt if they would have taken me anyway. So they take me down to the Army base, and they give me the physical, and they take my blood pressure, and it was 188/98. And that'll get you out of the Army. You know, I was not working on having a high blood pressure, and this was before I started using cocaine. But that was my blood pressure. So that kind of spared me that. And so, but that's just how it was in the 70s. I had to drink. And finally, the last person I did live-in attendant work for was a guy named Paul. And he had a very severe neck injury. He drove his wheelchair with his chin. And when he got his injury, they told him he was only had 3 years to live. And he ended up living like 14 years after that. But he also got a $250,000 settlement. And he decided, well, since I only have 3 years to live, I'm going to do a lot of cocaine. You know, and he did a lot of cocaine. And he turned his friends onto a lot of cocaine. Fortunately, I met him probably 7 or 8 years into it. Because if I'd have met him right on him at the beginning, I don't know if I'd be here. But I moved in there in 1980, I think it was. And the second day I'm living there, we're watching the television in the living room. And it's about 6 o'clock at night, and I drank about a quart of vodka, and I probably took about 6 to 10 ampicillin, because he had ampicillin, and it was a pill. And I thought, if people have pills, you take them. You know, so I took them. And we're watching the TV, and the vertical hold went out. And he said, well, why don't you go upstairs and get my shotgun? And I said, okay. So I go upstairs and get the shotgun. I come downstairs with it. He said, well, shoot the TV. Now, I have never shot a gun in my entire life. And I take the gun, I point it at the TV, and I pulled the trigger. And I'm like, wow, I'm like deaf. And there's smoke all over the place. And it was like this Remington 9mm mine something there. So we looked at the TV, and it was still playing. So he said, shoot it again. And I got it the second time. I remember remarking to somebody once that if the police had come, I could have gone to jail. And he looked at me and he said, if the police had come, you were going to jail. That kind of makes sense in retrospect, because they allowed people to do a lot in Berkeley in the 70s, but they wouldn't allow that, I don't think. So again, that was God looking out for me. And I don't know how I survived it all. But I also remember a few days after that, waking up about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just with this feeling that I had always had this Pollyanna outlook on life. I just felt like I would meet the right woman. I would get the right job. I would inherit $1 million, whatever. I would come into something would work out that I didn't have to put any effort into getting. And I woke up that afternoon and I realized, Bill, every single day from now on is going to be exactly the same as the previous day, which was this gray, bleak, dreary day of looking for drugs, looking for alcohol, mooching off people, conning people, making promises I know I couldn't keep. And it was that day of pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization that they talk about in the big book. Because I saw no hope. I had no idea that there was another way to live for me. And this was in November. And I drank for another few months. I didn't really have much knowledge of AA. And then one night I went to a party. It was for a friend of mine. And I'll tell one more story quickly, which was, again, I felt that I had to drink. I went to bed one night and I woke up the next morning and there was this big glass of whiskey by the side of the bed. And I picked it up and I just downed it. And like I said, I don't like to be dizzy, but I got dizzy. So I went in the shower, I turned on a hot shower thinking that'll work. Another thing that had never worked before, but I'm sure it was going to work this time. I get in the shower and after about a minute and a half, I fall out of the shower onto the floor. I get up, I look in the mirror, and there's this plastic disposable razor blade sticking out the side of my face, about an inch from my eye. And I looked at that and I took it out and thought about it. And the next day, I went to the drugstore and bought one of those Gillette regular razors because the plastic ones were unecological. That was the problem, that I was screwing with the ecology, because whatever it was, I had to convince myself that it was okay to continue drinking. So that's my last drinking story. So I go to this party, I take a quart of whiskey, it's somebody's birthday, it's one of the drug dealers that I know, and the other drug dealer that I mostly dealt with, I owed him $10,000 at the time. And he said he didn't like being around me when I was drinking. And that made me really uncomfortable because I was always drinking. And I was going with this woman, and she said to me that she wanted to break it off. It was one of those great, sex and drugs relationships. And I says, well, why do you want to do that? She goes, because I'm afraid you might hurt me sometime. And I had no idea what she meant by that because I'd never laid a finger on her. So I asked her what she meant. She says, well, your behavior is so unpredictable from one moment to the next that you're going to have to, that I'm afraid you might hurt me sometime. And that really was difficult to hear. Okay, 9 minutes. I thought I had 11. But, so I went to a party. I drank the quart that I took, came home, and I called Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew it was time. I was beaten. I was really beaten. So I called, and back then they didn't have an answering service. They didn't have the diverter. They had an answering service. And I picked up the phone. It was actually a speakerphone because the person with the wheelchair couldn't dial. We had to click this thing. So I tell the operator to call AA, and she called AA. And she said, well, and I said, well, Bill, and I'm having a problem with drinking. I don't know what I said. And she said, well, could you call us back tomorrow morning because I can't understand a word you're saying. And it was the perfect thing to say. I got up the next morning saying, I'll show you. I will call you back. And I called them back, and I went to the meeting, and it was fabulous. I really enjoyed it. The girlfriend of the drug dealer, actually, that I owed all the money to, gave me a ride, brought me back. But I didn't know what to do after that. So I drank again a few days later, and I bumped into my girlfriend, and she said, how'd it go? And I says, well, it didn't go that well. But it turned out, she said, well, why don't you try again? And that's when I had my spiritual awakening. It was when I became willing to try again. Because I'd always been so afraid of failure, I would never try again. And this time I did try again. And I had to try again another 30 times that first year. But I went to 5 meetings a week, every single day, every single week. And eventually it paid off. It paid off from the beginning, to be quite honest. But in February 22nd, 1982, I had my last drink. And that's by the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my willingness to ask for help, to rely on you people to save my life because you've done that. And I'm really grateful for that. And I tend to work AA light. I just kind of, I'm not one of those deeply spiritual people or anything, but somebody once said that if you want to do something, habit is a good way to go about it. And I've really developed the habits that I've needed to stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I continue to go to 4 meetings a week, come hell or high water. I work with newcomers. I have 3 sponsees. I write out the first 3 steps every day. It kind of brings me into the program. And I've done the 4th and 5th steps. My first 4th step was write down 4 things about yourself that you don't want anybody to know. And I did have 4 things about myself that I really didn't want anybody to know. But I told them to somebody. And I can only remember one of those things now. I don't even remember what the other 3 were. But you're not going to get to hear that. And I really like the 6th and 7th step. I chaired a meeting recently and I said that I think my biggest character defect is thinking that I can remove my character defects. And that's pride. And I just can't. If I could, I would. So a big part of my recovery nowadays is just making peace with my character defects. God's going to remove them or God is not. And I don't have to drive myself crazy trying to get rid of them. And that's a blessing. And I think the steps do work. And I'm also a big fan of the book. I think that there's a lot in there. My favorite passage is that part in page 45 where it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power greater than ourselves. We had to find a power greater than ourselves. And they said, that is the main purpose of this book, to help you to find that power that will solve your problem. And I think if we do these things that this says to do in that book, we do get our problem solved. And that's a blessing. It's not always great, but, I went to the doctor the other day, and they took my blood pressure, and it was 111/67. So that worked. And I'm grateful for that. And in 2005, I got cajoled into going to the World Services Convention. Like I said, I'm going to stay home unless I get conned or cajoled into doing something. And I had a great time, so I went in 2010, and I'm going July 1st to the one in Atlanta. And if you ever get a chance to go to one of those, they're really a lot of fun. It's amazing. And they're very informative. I really never thought I would be able to do that kind of stuff. This program has given me a life. And at the time I got here, any life was a life beyond my wildest dreams. So, and this one is a pretty good one. So I keep showing up, and I'm thinking, this is a little bit of a hard time of the year for me because I work at the university and I walk through the campus, and there's been all these graduation ceremonies, and kids walking around with their beaming parents and stuff. And I feel bad sometimes because I never finished college. But one of the things that I'm really kind of grateful for is that my feelings change, because I actually feel sadder for my parents for not being able to give them the opportunity to be those beaming parents. But I'm going to be retiring in 1.5 to 2.5 years, and there's nothing to say that I can't finish college now, and somewhere they'll be beaming, So thank you all very much, and take care.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.